finally, somebody in Congress has the balls to slam the Fed for prioritizing foreign banks over America's interests. So Zero Hedge has a nice article here. And again, this would not matter if it was Bernanke still in there. Oh, we've got a female, new Miss Yellen. And Miss Yellen's going to do what her handlers tell her to do, the same handlers that told Bernanke what to do. She's Jewish, by the way. Bernanke's Jewish, by the way. The one before him, Greenspan, Jewish. Volcker, Jewish. Is this a coincidence? Or is there... Yeah, okay. This is unacceptable. Congressman slams Yellen for prioritizing foreign banks over America's interests. Finally, the Fed is in Trump's crosshairs or sights. Before I get started, didn't the Webbot reports recently say the crosshairs are coming onto the Fed, so to speak, in the very near future, starting this year? It's really going to, put the Fed in a bad spotlight. It's coming. This might be the start of it. And what may be a harbinger of major headaches to come to the Fed, a recent letter as of January 31st, penned by Republican Representative Patrick McHenry, Vice Chairman of the Financial Services Committee, has lashed out at Janet Yellen, telling the Fed chair in no uncertain terms that despite the clear message delivered by President Donald Trump in prioritizing America's interest in international negotiations, it appears that the Federal Reserve continues negotiating international regulatory standards for the financial institutions among the global bureaucrats in foreign lands without transparency, accountability, or the authority to do so, end quote, he said. His assessment of this ongoing activity by the Fed, simply, 3 words, this is unacceptable, he said. McHenry's emphasis is on the international forums, such as the Financial Stability Board, the Basel Committee on Banking and Supervision, and the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, and he notes that, quote, continued participation in these forums must be predicated on achieving objectives set by the new administration, something which will likely require a comprehensive review of past agreements that unfairly penalized the American financial system in areas as varied as bank capital, insurance, derivatives, systemic risk, and asset management. He then adds that the secretive structures of these international forums must also be reevaluated, because when the deals were negotiated, international standards were turned into domestic regulations that forced American firms of various sizes to substantially raise their capital requirements, leading to slower economic growth here in America. Here one may recall how the Fed secretly provided tens of billions in under-the-table rescue loans to foreign banks doing business in the U.S. and others during the peak days of the 2008 financial crisis. His conclusion, however, is what must worry the Fed the most, because as McHenry notes, it is incumbent upon all regulators to support the U.S. economy and scrutinize international agreements that are killing American jobs. Accordingly, the Federal Reserve must cease all attempts to negotiate binding standards burdening American business until President Trump has had an opportunity to nominate and appoint officials that prioritize America's best interests. The implication: the current Fed officials do not prioritize America's best interests and are therefore expendable. Expect a furious backlash by the political media in Wall Street, screaming that this is the first example of the Republican Congress and the new administration targeting Fed independence, which, as we have demonstrated over the past 8 years, exists only in ivory tower economist tutorials and disappears the moment banks, either domestic or foreign, need a bailout, with the staggering political consequences such actions entail. In short, it is about to get hot in the hollowed chambers of the Mariner Eccles building. His full letter is below. Dear, go ahead and read this here. Why not? Dear Chair Yellen, I am writing regarding the Federal Reserve's continued participation in international forums on financial regulations. Despite the clear message delivered by President Donald Trump in prioritizing America's interest in international negotiations, it appears that the Federal Reserve continues negotiating international regulatory standards for financial institutions among global bureaucrats in foreign lands without transparency, accountability, or the authority to do so. This is unacceptable. Continued participation in international forums such as the Financial Stability Board, the Basel Committee on Banking and Supervision, and the International Association of Insurance Supervisors is predicated on achieving the objects set by the new administration. That will likely require a comprehensive review of past agreements that unfairly penalize the American financial system in areas as varied as bank, capital, insurance, derivatives, systemic risk, and asset management. The secretive structures of these international forums must also be reevaluated. Agreements like the Basel III Accords were negotiated and agreed to by the Federal Reserve with little notice to the American people and were the result of an opaque decision-making process. The international standards were then turned into domestic regulations that forced American firms of various sizes to substantially raise their capital requirements, leading to slower economic growth here in America. It is incumbent upon all regulators to support the U.S. economy and scrutinize international agreements that are killing American jobs. Accordingly, the Federal Reserve must cease all attempts to negotiate binding standards burdening American business until President Trump has an opportunity to nominate and appoint officials that prioritize America's best interests. Sincerely, Patrick McHenry, Vice Chairman, Financial Services Committee. When I read stuff like this, especially this one, again, I just go back to that Webbot report. Federal Reserve, coming under the crossfires. The crosshairs, not fires, crosshairs, so to speak. The Federal Reserve, secrets revealed. The Federal Reserve in a bad spotlight. I should have maybe grabbed some of the reports and found the words Federal Reserve, but it'll be the word Fed and stuff, which they usually refer to the Federal Reserve in the report, just the Fed or whatever. It's everywhere. It's all over the place. But see, the Fed or the Federal Reserve wasn't all over the place in these reports a few years back, and even further. Sure, it mentioned stuff about the Fed and the dollar dying, death of the dollar thing, whatever. But it didn't talk nearly as much as it has been lately about the Federal Reserve and the problems. You could almost see Donald Trump setting up the end of the Fed. And you can see it, in my eyes anyways, starting with Rand Paul's, I guess, audit the Fed. I think under the Trump administration, we can finally audit the Fed. Not only that, again, everything happens because it's supposed to happen when the club wants and the people want it to happen. And I think to get past the turmoil and the market problems and everything, Federal Reserve, it's all going to be like lumped in. And we're going to have this big problem with the Federal Reserve. But they're going to use it to their advantage while they still have it. Because they could easily make the Federal Reserve, you're going to buy up all the debt. You're going to buy up all the stuff you'd like to crash. You're going to buy it all up. And then when you're holding all of it, you're going to go bye-bye. Oh, and we're not paying interest on it either. We just wrote a law today and passed it. No more interest for the Federal Reserve. It's out. It's gone. See, if they audit the Fed, they're going to find out. I'm telling you now, they're going to find out because the Federal Reserve is only allowed to keep so much profit from its activities and then give it to the shareholders who are hidden from public view. We never get to see and know who they are, but you already know who they are. It's the club. These big banks own the Federal Reserve. You will find out. And I think if there was an audit, you would find that they've been taking a little bit more than they were allowed to, dispersing it among themselves, so to speak, amongst other things, such as lending money to all these foreign banks under the table. We didn't even know about it. It wasn't even on their balance sheet. We have no idea where there's, It needs to be done so we can bury that piece of garbage once and for all and go back to what the Constitution said. Congress shall, basically say what money is and isn't and set the value of it. Not create a third party that creates paper money backed by nothing, charges us interest to borrow the money. Why would we ever print money that we have to pay back? That's our own. Would you ever do that if you had a printing press for yourself? Would you print money and then charge yourself interest on it? No, it's stupid. Why are we doing this? Because it only benefits the 0.001%, whatever, these people. The club. That's why it's there. No other reason. That's why it's there. Take care.